All right, I want to explain just some of the procedures and the principles about what I've done here in order to get the crops where they are at this stage of things. A lot of times in our agricultural approach, you're talking to me about doing tilling the ground, breaking up the sod. There's a lot of breaking up of that soil from tilling and with mattocks or hoes. Now there's been none of that done, and that's purposeful. In this approach of agriculture, sometimes called regenerative agriculture or holistic, sometimes permaculture, the idea is we want to have the least amount of disturbance to the soil as we can. Why is that? Because in the soil we have a whole community of, we can say, microbes. That's one word describing a lot of creatures that God has created under the ground. Some we can see with our eyes, like a worm or other bugs down there, but some we can't see with our eyes. We'd see with a microscope. There's different bacteria and protozoa and different names like that. Okay, well they build a whole community underground. And so if we go in there and till that, we're destroying their community. It's like coming in and a big wind or rain floods out your communities and you don't have any houses, you have to rebuild them. Well, you'll spend all your time rebuilding them and you won't spend your time doing other work. So that's why we don't do the tilling. We use the broad fork, for example, and put the mulch down and let the worms come up and take the nutrients down to the littler creatures. Okay, so that's the first step, but then as we've planted it, I've mentioned we've planted the seeds into compost. And compost is, in a sense, you can think of it as one package deal, one medium that will give us the benefits of replacing our fertilizers. It'll replace our pesticides, so that's the things you would spray to get rid of bad pests that will come and hurt your crops, and also herbicides. Herbicides are those things you would spray on or apply in order to kill some of the weeds. Okay, so none of that has been used here, just so you know, and that was the whole idea about me doing this experiment for us, is I would do it on this property and see if it really works. And what I've noticed throughout then is that there were times in the earlier growth of these crops where, for example, some of the times on these beans, for example, I would notice these little creatures, we call them aphids. They're little green things that line the whole stem or get underneath on the leaves. And they tend to then eat your leaves, and of course that's bad. If the leaves are eaten, then they can't capture the sunlight to make that photosynthesis and make the simple sugars that feed the community under the ground, who are then going to bring them helpful nutrients for the plant. So those aphids are bad insects for us. Well, I also had along here, and now they've kind of dried up some, but I had different flowering plants. One of them we call marigolds. And there's these different plants that will attract what we call ladybugs. They're these kind of little bugs with spots on them. And they're beneficial insects, and they'll come and eat the aphids. Now, I saw this multiple times during these past couple of months, where in the morning I'd see these aphids, these bad guys on my plants, and I'd think, oh no, bad. But I would also see a ladybug around it, and I would watch them, and they would be going after those aphids. And by the end of the day, that place where it was covered with aphids was now clean because of ladybugs. And that happens with a multitude of other bugs. And so I've identified about 4 or 5 different insects that seem to be my friends as far as cleaning off bad insects that might eat leaves and all that. Now, in addition to that, there's going to be a point when our plants, the beans, as you know, they'll get flowers, and we want to then share our pollen from one flower or plant to another. Well, there's a whole area of insects we call pollinators. So those are bees. There's some types of moths I've identified. Butterflies may be involved, I'm not sure. There's a few other insects, But particularly we think of bees, and they've done a lot of work in cross-pollinating and getting them so that they'll bear fruit. And this all comes about because the soil is being helped out with this compost. So just take that into mind. I've seen this play out time and again throughout these past months, and it really does work. Now I will admit, I told you that this area I'm standing had maybe a centimeter, maybe as much as 2 centimeters of topsoil. So it has them. But as you go up the hill to the north, there was no topsoil. It had been washed down here. So up there I've noticed that the plants are not as healthy, and there's more bad insects and fewer beneficial ones. Though there are beneficial ones, but anyway, you can see the relationship that's going on there. So I just want to emphasize, no fertilizer was used, no herbicides, no pesticides, and you know, we have some fruit coming on here. I've had beans. I've already been eating beans and some other summer squash. So I don't think it's absolutely the best crop I've ever seen, but starting in the conditions I had, I'm pleased that I'm seeing something, and I would expect that the next year, if I were to be on the same area, it would be even that much better. So this is how it can look with this regenerative approach.